Hi everyone, welcome to Sacred Soulful Sundays. My name is B. Pila, and let's get into this week's session. All right, so today we're going to be talking about what's called being present, right? We've heard a lot about this. I think everybody's kind of at some point understood, read, been informed about this whole mindfulness movement. So let's get this very clear. Mindfulness is not necessarily, even though we think of it as being present, in reality, you want to get your mind not full. Does that make sense? So it's actually the opposite. But for the sake of common language and what everybody talks about these days in a safety zone, because what I've found is that when you talk about these esoteric concepts, right, a lot of people they might feel a little strange about that because of their, maybe religious backgrounds. They think that there's something weird about this concept. So mindfulness, I believe, has been used a great deal in the common terms out there so that people feel comfortable, even in the business world. Let's be mindful of what we're doing, right? Have you gotten that kind of vibe that there's a lot of people that feel more comfortable with the idea of being mindful than maybe being spiritual, right? But all in all, it's really one and the same, right? Everything is a layering of awakening ideas, okay? And the more we know about these things, the better we can be at life in general, because life is here to present us with these challenges so that we can grow to the next level of our evolution, both inside and out, right? One of your actions, in other words, getting road rage or getting upset at somebody taking your parking space, doesn't show up for like 3 months later, right? Something comes up that someone does something to you or you do something to them, right? That is similar in energy, right? Let's just talk about it from an energetic perspective. I find that these things are happening almost instantaneously, as in what you just experienced. You see, you held back from expressing anger. You were compassionate, right? And then it turned around immediately into something that was very nice from him directly, almost like within minutes of each other. This is what I feel is happening with this process. I feel that we are having the opportunity to get immediate response to our actions, whether they be in a positive nature or a negative nature. Just pay attention to that in your life. Whenever something happens, take a pause and say, when did I express myself that way to cause that? Because we're starting to make that connection of like, when I behave this way, that comes back to me right away. I was noticing how the teachings that I've been going through, especially in the last few months, have layered one on top of the other, very naturally in a significant way. We're not really conscious of it because we're not teaching, and I'm not teaching in what I consider to be a linear pattern. Okay. I really don't go in a linear pattern. But as I started receiving the ideas of being present for this week's talk, it ends with something that we talked about very recently, which is surrender. Okay. So being present, what if I told you that all of your suffering is a choice? Okay. Let that sink in for a moment. All suffering is a choice, and I'll tell you why. Because fear and pain do not live in the present moment. Okay? Fear and pain or suffering lives in our thoughts. Okay? It lives in the past and lives in the future. Does that make sense to you guys? How many times do you catch yourself feeling fearful, feeling anxious, feeling guilty, feeling resentful, feeling upset? And that stemmed from a thought about some incident in your past or some incident that you believe might happen in the future. If you took a moment to pause and find the origin of the thought that instilled the emotion that is expressing itself negatively, you probably would discover that it's just a thought about something in your past or something in your future. Because if you're in the present moment, there's no such thing. Does that make sense? It's hard to kind of, the only way to get to that place is through being what is called, and what Eckhart Tolle calls, the witness to your thoughts. The witness. Because you are so much more than your thoughts. And that's the first tenet of being present. The first tenet of being present is that you are more than your thoughts. Your thoughts are like little clouds that go by, right? Is the sky the cloud? No. The cloud just goes by and drifts by, right? And that's your thought. This is why meditation is so challenging for some when they start, because those thoughts just keep going by, you know? You can't control the clouds. You're like, oh my God, there's another one, right? And you want to stop the clouds from floating by, but they don't. They just like keep floating by. But if you get yourself into the perspective of separating yourself from that thought and just believe that thought to be a thought, a cloud that's floating by, and you are the observer of the cloud, you're able to shift into that space called the now, called the present moment, right? So the first tenet is that you are not your thoughts, okay? Now, of course, we're having thoughts all day long. And the question that I have for you is, are those thoughts predominantly positive or predominantly negative? Are those thoughts generated from memories of your past? Or are those thoughts generated from ideas that have been thrown at you for the future? And that is the beginning of being present. So obviously, if we could stop our thoughts, we could end our suffering, right? Because if you're just in the present without a thought, which is why meditation is such a good tool for that, okay? If you get to that sweet spot, you know, like David G says, if you get to that sweet spot of non-thought, you don't suffer. You're in that state of bliss that we feel in those little moments that we are just, everything's good in the world, right? Everything's fine right now, right here in this present now, okay? And that's the beauty of learning how to be present. I think it's one of our greatest challenges as human beings, because the moment you wake up, you're thinking. But are you a witness or an observer of your thoughts? Or are you part of your thoughts? Like, do you play that role? Do you identify with those thoughts? And you know by now that identifying with something is really a function of the ego, right? The ego is a protective survival mechanism that is part of you, because we all have the ego. But does the ego control you? Do you let yourself fall into the trap of the ego? Because basically what the ego is, it's those thoughts that tell you that you're not good enough, or that something's going to happen, or that if you do this wrong, you're going to look like a fool, or you're going to become ashamed, or you feel guilty. That's the ego protecting you, of course. The ego has great intentions. Don't get me wrong. It exists for a reason, okay? But the ego is that little drama queen inside of you, okay? Plain and simple. The ego is the drama. Okay. And whenever you see or witness someone in that state of drama, right? How many of you have seen people in that state of drama, sometimes expressing themselves like little kids having a tantrum, right? That is that person acting out the ego. All the emotions that are building up inside of that person. And sometimes it takes over us. I'm not going to say that we all fall into that trap, all of us at all times. But the question is, are we able to separate ourselves in that moment and say, okay, hold on a second. Let me just watch this. Kind of like if you were watching a child have a trauma, have a crisis, right? If you were watching it like a play, you would probably watch yourself and say, oh my God, that person's acting like ridiculous. And you could even spot yourself doing that, right? So how do you stop thinking? How do you stop thinking? What practice do you have in your daily life to help you stop becoming one with the ego versus witnessing your thoughts? Okay. I think that just by the very idea that the moment you are in that state, you say to yourself, I am not my thoughts. I am much bigger than my thoughts. Just by doing that, it allows you to separate and create a gap between the expression and the you that is inside. Does that make sense? Now, obviously, taking deep breaths and being physical about it, like actually touching your body, maybe touching your heart, taking a deep breath, allowing the body to take over for a moment helps us. And that's why breathing is such an amazing tool for the beginning of a meditation, right? Because it allows us to take control of our body and put ourselves in a state of relaxation that doesn't have the drama. It's actually present. While you're breathing and consciously breathing, you are in the now. You are in the present moment. When you tell your body, okay, breathe in, breathe out. The past and the future don't exist in that precise moment. So we've been conditioned to think that we are our mind and that our past will define our future, right? And Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this. I love the way he speaks that, oftentimes we wake up in the morning, we follow the same routine. We grab our phone, we start looking through the Facebook and the Instagram, and we do this and we see, and we start comparing ourselves to others, and we start judging and say, oh no, my God, I have this appointment at such and such a time and I need to dress up and I don't have enough time. And maybe I can get into the shower, and maybe, oh, I don't think I'm going to blow dry my hair because it's going to take too long. And I think the car, oh my God, I forgot to put gas and I have to get to coffee. Maybe we ran out of coffee. Oh my God, the creamer. And these are our thoughts, right? It's exhausting. Oh my God, yes, exhausting. But these are our thoughts. But are our thoughts really, is that true? Is all of the energy that we are dispensing to produce these thoughts and the emotions that they bring up in us, are they really valid? Like, do they serve us in any way? Probably not. Probably not. So number one tenet, as I said, okay, is that you are not your thoughts. Okay. But if you become the observer, you immediately release that ego-driven thought process. Okay? The beginning of freedom is the moment of realization when you know that you are not the thinker. That's a quote from Eckhart Tolle's book. Okay? The beginning of freedom is the moment of realization when you know you are not the thinker. Okay? That's your awakening moment. Because number two tenet of being present is that the present moment is all you have. That's it. The present moment is really all you have. I don't know about anybody, but so far we can't time travel. Okay? And I have never been able to live in my future. And even if I tried to go back to my past and fix something, it's just not doable. So the truth is that the only thing we have is this very moment. This is it. Okay? So there is no past and future in the now moment. Okay? And you have to ask yourself, how many of your thoughts are from your past? And how many of your thoughts are from your future? So we get to the third tenet of being present. And guess what that one is? Acceptance. This is where we really get our panties in a twist, okay? Because we are most often not in acceptance of what is. Okay? This is where we start getting anxious, okay? Because guess what? It's called surrender. Acceptance is surrender. They're one and the same. So how often do you find yourself in that state in which you are trying to change the situation or the person? That's even better, right? Trying to change the person. How successful are you in changing someone else? Not very successful. I've tried it many, many times. Doesn't work. Okay. In reality, the only person that you can change is yourself. And by default, those around you change, right? This is when we get into that trouble of like, I always and I never and I have to, right? We talked about those words. I have to do this because if not, this other person is going to react like this, right? Is that really true? And that's the work of Byron Katie. The two questions she asks, which are fascinating to me, is like, ask yourself, is this true? Is it true? There's tons of YouTube videos about it. And it's interesting because if you ever pull up one of her sessions as she's doing this work that she calls the work with people, she brings somebody up on stage and she sits them in front of them and says, okay, so tell me about the crisis or the issue or the drama that you're having, right? And they go about telling them, well, my husband, he cheated on me and he did this and he did that and he did that. And then she goes through this whole process of asking questions, you know, and it's fascinating because by the end, the people are like, okay, maybe I really am not affected by this, really. And that's how she gets to a state where that person is in acceptance of the situation, because in reality, that's the suffering. The pain and the suffering occurs when we don't accept a situation. I've said it a million times on this call that one of my greatest teachers is my own son, okay? Because I had to learn how to love him as he is unconditionally. Okay, because I mean, our children are actually some of our best teachers, or maybe our husbands or our partners in life. That's why they're there. They're there to teach us these specific little lessons, you know, that we can't change them. We want to, we would like for them to be different, but that's not possible. So either we accept them exactly as they are, just like we can also accept ourselves actually as we are, unconditionally loving ourselves, okay? And then that situation goes from a 10 crisis to a 0 crisis. Because all of a sudden you've stopped the resistance, right? It's resistance that creates the tension, right? I've said it a million times too. It's like a rubber band, right? A rubber band doesn't work unless you pull it in resistance, right? If it's flaccid, it's not doing anything. It's neutral. It's kind of like, I guess what this whole process is putting the car in neutral. How many times this week, pay attention to how many times you find yourself engaging in a drama instead of accepting the situation as it is. We want to be in a positive state of emotions, right? Because we already know that first lesson that I gave, the first ever was that our emotions are energy in motion, right? That we are vibrational creatures always. That energy does not die. It only transmutes and transforms, right? These are some basics, right? Basic. And that the energy in motion with which we push out, whatever we project is what we receive, because we are magnets, right? If we start from this tenet, I would say that we want to be in a state of positive emotions or energy because we know how good it feels, which is causing us to feel happy. So the state of happiness is really an expression of, like you said, Florinda, love. And we also know that there are only two emotions. There's only fear and love, period. Everything in between is a derivation of that, right? So love is an expression of our inner joy. Fear is an expression of the negative aspects of ourselves. Okay, that's it. If we start from those extremely simplified terms, we want to always try and be in a positive state, because as we do so, not only do positive things come to us and we express ourselves in the world in a positive way, okay, we stay in a space of love, vibrationally speaking, okay, which is coming from the energy that is projected from our hearts and our heart chakra. So guess what? We're talking today about some other place. We're talking about this energy, right? The one that's up here. This energy, when it finds itself in a state of negative expression, okay, it is not being present, because your constant state is actually in here. That's who you really are. And that's why when I say the words, you are not your thoughts, okay, what you really are is here. It's an energy of the heart. It's a state of loving joy. So when we are expressing ourselves in a negative emotion, we are creating a resistance. It's like if you took a rubber band, wrapped it around your heart, wrapped it around your head, and now you're pulling in opposite directions. Okay? Which is causing a state of resistance. It's excellent for Pilates, but not good for our minds. Okay? So the resistance is when you do not accept the situation for what it is. You're not in acceptance. It's like, I will not accept that that guy took my parking space. I'm going to get out of the car and I'm going to tell him a few words because he's an idiot. Right? Now, instead, what Lily did is I accept that he might be going through, he might be in greater need to get into the store than I am. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to find another parking space. It's not a big deal, right? So let me just, so she stayed in a neutral state and allowed herself to feel positive emotions, which allowed her day to flow in a much better way, right? Instead of going upstream, like Abraham Hicks says, she turned the boat, the canoe, downstream and flowed. Now, how many times do you turn your boat upstream and decide to go the other way? It's like, I'm gonna get this freaking asshole. I can't believe he forgot me. Look at this, right? And then what happens is you ran on the curb, you burst your tire, you got into the elevator and you got stuck. The car hit you, all of a sudden the shit hits the fan, right? And this is what we don't want to create, right? But in reality, that all stems from our thoughts, right? That's all it is. It's a thought. So right now, I want you to go back and explore this idea of, is the ego really bad? No, that's a judgment. The ego is. That's all it is. It is. And it's there to serve a purpose. It's a protective mechanism. It's a survival mechanism. It's part of who we are, because as we enter into this body as a human being, the ego is the one that protects us from danger. Okay? When we are not in this body, we are in a state of joyful bliss connected to God. When we separate ourselves from that joyful state of bliss that is God, which is pure love, we enter a state of polarity, which provides contrast. Okay? It provides the contrast for our own growth. In reality, we will all end up in the same place that we started, which is one with God. Okay? But let's put it this way. What's the point if we don't express and experience the whole journey? Right? If we already are, how is it that you express or create something from nothing? And this is a very deep thought. Okay, so try and go with me on this, okay? The point of God, and in fact, in conversations with God, is that God, or the energy of God, is in a constant state of expression, expansion, and creation. Are we clear about that? The energy that is God is in a constant state of expansion, creation, and experience. It is through us that God creates. And not just through us, through everything that is in the universe. In other words, everything that is good and everything that is bad. We've talked about the polarity of this beautiful planet that we live on. How perfect is it as in schoolroom Earth, right? Schoolroom Earth offers the perfect, it's kind of like if you're in a scientific experiment, right? And you know how you take a petri dish, right? And you're going to put something on it, and it's like you're going to watch it grow and become something, right? That's what we are. We're the little experiment. We're the energy in motion. We're the creation. We're the creative process that is God, right? So judging it as good or bad is not really a valid way of speaking, but language is very challenging, because we have been conditioned to think that something is either bad or good. And everybody, I guarantee every single one of you believes something to be bad that someone else might think is good. Okay. The general collective in this call probably is that we agree on things that are bad, right? But you might go to another place on this planet and someone might believe that something else is bad. And you might disagree with that. That's a belief. You see? So that's a thought that we keep thinking. But generally speaking, one of the beautiful things that God created in us is our emotions, because our emotions are the compass. Is a compass a good or a bad thing? If you're going north, is it bad to go south? If you're going east, is it bad to go west? No, it's just relative. If the destination that you want to go to is on the east and you're going west, is that bad? It's relative, right? Relative to the fact that your destination is on the east, but you could go west. It's not bad. It's just the wrong direction, which is, remember last class I said that the definition of the term sin is just missing the mark? When your compass is backwards, okay? In other words, when you're in negativity, you're just being given an opportunity to turn yourself around and go towards positivity. Is it good or is it bad? Does that explanation make sense? I hope. It's hard. It's one of those things that it's difficult to express in words, because we all know when we're feeling bad, and we all know when we're not feeling good, right? This feeling comes from within us. This compass is called emotions, and that compass is our conscious. When we are in resistance with the energy of love, which is God, we don't feel good. That's the compass. It's going to tell you, hey, you're going south. You're supposed to be going north. Excuse me. Hello. You're supposed to be going north. Turn around, GPS. Rerouting. It's telling you, reroute. And you're not listening. You're still going south. Reroute. Turn the car around, right? That's what God is telling you. But,
can I add something to your beautiful wisdom that I have learned from you many years ago? So I want to add something that it was really key, and when I was listening to Florinda and Lily, it finally clicked. I mean, I know this answer, and I've been practicing now for many years, but we all come with 4 beautiful feelings to this world. That is the password of humans, which is love, hope, faith, and truth. If we start looking into the opposite of that, is anxiety and fear and all of the other feelings, including ego. Mm-hmm. But when you know, so one of the things is we are all born with that, by the way. We are born with hope, with love, with faith, and with truth. Mm-hmm. So when you were explaining about how we switch it, and then how our thoughts are like, we're going from the good to the bad and the rerouting, we just need to believe and trust that those feelings are inside of us. And they're attributes of our soul. They are released by our personality. So depending on the personality of all of us, we can switch that powerful, louder. I'm a loud person, so it's different on me comparing to one of my sisters, but we all have it. It's just the power to know, starting today, that you were born with it. So instead of like you thinking or doing something, believing something, you just act with it. So when our actions act with those 4 beautiful feelings, then you know that you are in your truth and your power and your love and your hope and your faith. And when you combine all those things, you're just finally creating something powerful that is the real core of who you are.
You are always that core. It's the emotions that we feel. Thank you, Maritza. The emotions, whenever we feel a negative emotion, guys, which is usually caused by our thoughts and usually caused when we're not being in our thoughts in a present moment. This is what we're talking about today, is practicing being in the present moment, because the suffering only starts when we leave that present moment and we fill our idea with the ego, because the ego is just protecting us, right? And the conditioning, our parents our parents were great at this, you know. They all were trying to protect us. Think of your parent. This is the parent is the ego, right? Think of your parent telling you, niña, ten cuidado, no manejes tan rápido, you know, put your seatbelt on, right? That's the ego. The ego is just always trying to protect you. It's not a bad thing. It's just trying to take care of you just in case something bad happens to you. Like, it's always in a state of fear, right? But that usually occurs from thoughts that are in the future, right? Or in the past. This is what we're trying to practice, is learning that the present moment, the now moment, is that beautiful, blissful state of the four emotions that Maritza just brought up. Hope, love, joy, truth. We are that, not our thoughts. We are always in a state of perfect harmony with God. We are all in a state of evolving. Like I've said it a million times, that I can't even recognize who I am today versus who I was 10 years ago. Okay. It's like another human being. How did that happen? Okay. That happened because I started getting back to my
Because
original.
you met your beautiful tribe.
Yes, this is true. This is true. I know that I am getting much better every day at being in the now, at keeping my emotions in a stable state of ease and flow.
Hope you enjoyed what we talked about today. And if you did, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. We love to hear what you have to say.